Helen and Jan, as I say, have given up their very precious time to come here and speak to us today, and I think it does give an indication of just how thriving the third sector is in Bristol. The fact that we have both the Chief Executive and the leader of the City Council here with us. And who would like to go first? It's Helen. So Helen's going to lead us off with some thoughts about the third sector. Hopefully there will be some time for some questions, but we are a little bit limited because clearly both of you have to get away again to carry on your interviewing this afternoon, I understand. So Helen, thank you very much and welcome.
Well, thanks, Karen, and it's great to see so many friends in the room, actually, because I think, if nothing else, my kind of CV since I became a member of Bristol City Council is that I have been very involved with a number of organisations that are represented here around the room, and I hope that you believe that I don't need convincing about the role of the third sector in moving towards the kind of Bristol of the future. I'm also going to slightly correct Claire, because in a way, you know, it was the other things we were doing today that we wanted to do around this one, because this was a very important one. So although today is a very important day because we're interviewing, interestingly from your point of view, for the neighbourhoods strategic director, so the new neighbourhoods post in the senior leadership team that Jan is creating, we're interviewing today. Everybody else on the panel has had to be given 2.5 hours off for lunch, which isn't normally how we do things in the council, and we'll go back and see the rest of the candidates this afternoon. But the neighbourhoods strategic director is also going to be a very important position for the relationship between the third sector, the emerging neighbourhood partnerships, how we're trying to drive the council forward, but at the same time we're making the council a much more strategic player, a much more engaging player than we've perhaps been in the past, but also to recognise that until we turn the services round so that people in neighbourhoods feel that they've got some influence on those services, we're going to have quite, you know, there's still quite a long way to go. So in a way, I'm doing what I don't really like doing when I talk to groups, which is to say, have a bit of faith in where we're going, because obviously there are some concerns about the new directions in the council, and we recognise that very much. But at the same time, I think there's also a recognition that there are green shoots, and at long last, some of the things that people talk about in other places, they do it this way, they do it that way, why doesn't Bristol do it that way? I think we're embracing some of the best of that, and at a critical time, because this whole agenda, I don't want to give you too many buzzwords all in one day, but this whole agenda is very, very much what the government agenda is around empowering people. And I think it's quite an interesting time to think about all this, isn't it? I keep being told, why can't the British elections be as exciting as the American ones? Actually, I think it's probably only our perception that they're exciting. If you talk to a huge swathe, well, not that I've spoken personally to a huge swathe of Americans, if you know what I mean, but my cousin lives in the States, and his view is, actually it doesn't impact at all on a lot of people, because a lot of people don't vote in the USA and all that kind of thing. So the whole thing about people's involvement in local democracy, people feeling that it does make a difference who you vote for, that different people have different approaches to how we take the city forward. All of those things do matter, but at the heart of it, for the government and for us, is about how you do engage more people and how people can really influence services. Now, I know that in the notes that Wendy sent us, one of the things that we were asked to talk about was about the local area agreement target around the third sector. And I'm assuming there's nobody from the government office here, is that right?
Hands up if you are.
I'm going to say something that's just a little tiny bit critical of their role. I think many of you know, when we suggested, and I know it was very strongly supported by Voscur, that we included in our local area agreement the third sector target, the thriving environment for the third sector. We had a bit of a job with Voscur because they basically said, well, you don't need that because Bristol's already got a thriving third sector. Hang on a minute, this is our agreement. It's supposed to be tailor-made around the Bristol situation. Our agreement with government about how we can stretch ourselves on some of the targets and deliver core services better and reach neighbourhoods better. So we actually had to have an argument with them about the inclusion of the third sector target. But that wasn't an argument that I wasn't happy to have, if that's not too many negative. I was very happy to have that argument because my role as a ward councillor in one of the more deprived parts of the city, my role way back in the 90s in the Bristol Regeneration Partnership, and everything I've done since then really shows me that having that thriving third sector in Bristol is one of the things actually that makes Bristol quite unique, and is one of the things that we want to foster, and it's one of the things that is good and will form the strong basis as we turn around these services to be much more neighbourhood focused. So my commitment and our commitment, I know that Jan has already spoken to individual groups and to the Voscur meeting that we came to earlier in the summer, shortly after Jan's arrival, is absolutely paramount. And especially, and I know from talking to people at lunchtime, that you've had some sessions talking about commissioning services this morning, especially as we move to that new environment of commissioned services. What I really, really don't want to happen is that in a year's time, when people look back and say, yeah, but she said, you know, we would have a big role in delivering services, but actually what's happened is that the contracts have all been packaged up into such large chunks that we haven't been able to engage with them. All of those things, I would hate that to happen. I'm very, very serious about the commitment to the third sector getting those commissioned contracts. I noticed that again in Wendy's notes it said something about organisations are worried about their grants. And realistically, we know that kind of grants, in that old sense of the word, won't be the name of the game as we move forward. There will be grants, there will be obviously start-up grants for new organisations. We always need to be clear that we must make headroom for creating the capacity to be able to support new ideas, because lots of new ideas start in communities and start in the third sector, and we want to be able to support that. But in terms of that commissioning agenda, I am very, very keen that we use Bristol's thriving third sector organisations to commission those services on lots of grounds, and one of them isn't that it's cheaper. So I'm under no illusions that we shouldn't be expecting groups to go for full cost recovery when they are in contracts with us. We shouldn't be thinking this is a cheaper option than doing it ourselves, although because of the on-costs in the City Council, it often is. The big ground for me is that you in your organisations are closer to people, you're more flexible and fleet of foot than this great super tanker that we're trying to transform at the moment of the council will ever be. And that responsiveness, and I think that that's another very important element of why we want to have third sector engagement right at the heart of the commissioning agenda. But we recognise, and this is something that Jan and I spoke about the last time we came to Voscur together, was that we recognise that neither the City Council in writing those specs for commissioned services, or you in many cases in responding to those specs are ready for that yet. So we do need to put in place very quickly some training so that we can specify the services that we want in a way that means it is much more possible for you and your organisations to have that conversation with the City Council. And I think that that's a jolly good thing. So I hope that that's just given you a brief overview about the commitment to continuing third sector engagement, if you like. It sounds very cold. It's much more than that. It's a very I think, a warm relationship, challenging one, but I think it's a warm relationship and one that's quite right. And I'm going to hand over to Jan so that we can leave more time for questions, and then we get on to the Voscurs.
Thank you, Mum.